Rome. Year 82 AD. The sun burns over the marble bleachers. 50,000 throats roar as one monster. In the center of the arena, a gate slowly opens. A roar, not human. The eyes of the audience shine. The condemned man trembles. What you are about to discover is unlike anything you've ever heard before. Because the Colosseum, that architectural wonder that today attracts tourists, was actually the most ambitious theater of horrors ever built. Here, it wasn't just about fighting. Here, power was shaped with blood. Did you know that there were animals trained not only to kill, but to rape humans in rituals dedicated to the gods? That a man was forced to represent Prometheus while an eagle devoured his liver, for real? And that there was an execution so cruel with elephants that the audience, for the first time, screamed for mercy, for the beasts. Today we won't talk about honorable gladiators. We will talk about the sickest side of the Colosseum. About the games that crossed every limit. And about the men, women, and children who died for fun. Stay until the end, because the last story will change the way you see human history forever. Before judging Rome, you must first understand it. The empire was not sustained only by armies and laws. It was sustained by something far more powerful, spectacle. And not just any spectacle, but one that put the people face to face with death, mastered it, and cheered for it. The emperors knew that as long as the people had bread and circus, there would be no rebellion. That's how the Colosseum was born, a perfect machine for keeping the people distracted, submissive, and thirsty for blood. But it went beyond entertainment. It was pure propaganda. Every execution, every fight, every scream of agony was a message. Rome commands. Rome decides who lives and who dies. Unlike the Greeks, who sought athletic glory, or the Celts, who sang of their heroes, the Romans transformed violence into state art. In their culture, the suffering of others was not a tragedy, it was part of the natural order. And the more cruel the spectacle, the stronger the empire seemed. Does it sound exaggerated? Think about this: what entertains you today? How much of someone else's pain do you consume without realizing it? Maybe, just maybe, our Colosseum is still alive. In the heart of the Colosseum, not only did men die. Wild creatures died too, and many times, they were the true stars of the show. Behind every beast that stepped onto the sand, there was a silent executioner, the bestiarius. A man trained to provoke, torture, and manipulate animals until they became weapons. But some went further. Like Carpophorus, for example. A slave who became a legend. It was said that he could kill a boar, a bear, a leopard, and a lion, in one single afternoon. Not with swords, but with his own hands. Impressive? Wait. He also taught his animals to obey inhuman orders. It is said that he trained a rhinoceros to fight by his side. He formed an army of beasts. He even made certain animals engage in sexual acts with humans, as part of a ritual to worship the god Jupiter. Because in Rome, the unthinkable became possible. And the more grotesque the act, the louder the applause. But it wasn't just Carpophorus. There were eagles trained to tear out human organs, lions that followed commands like war dogs, and panthers that danced before killing. It wasn't a zoo. It was a hell disguised as theater. A place where the line between civilization and barbarism was broken with every roar. Imperial Rome didn't just kill, it performed. The Colosseum became a stage where the darkest myths came to life. But not with actors or special effects. With real blood. With real bodies. Want to see Prometheus chained while an eagle devours his liver? No problem. A condemned man will be the body, and a trained eagle, the punishment. Want to see Hercules defeat a giant? Sure. Just stitch together the torsos of amputated soldiers, and have Emperor Commodus come down to the arena to kill them one by one. Anything went, as long as the result was all. Because in the end, it wasn't about religion or art. It was about power. About showing the emperor as a living god. About making the myths not just legends, but truths incarnated in human pain. And the audience applauded. Not out of ignorance, but because they believed it was meant to be. Because every scene reinforced the idea that Rome was the center of the universe, and everyone else, mere disposable actors. How far does fanaticism go when fantasy and violence become one? In the Colosseum, there was no fiction. Only ritualized brutality. Not everyone who entered the Colosseum knew why they were there. And not everyone was human. Rome brought animals from the farthest corners of the known world, elephants from Africa, lions from the Atlas, bears from the Balkans, rhinoceroses, tigers, and even giraffes. They weren't just curiosities. They were tools of death. But also, victims. Elephants, for example, were trained to perform tricks, bow before the emperor, dance. And yet, they were also used to crush condemned men alive while the crowd laughed. Until one day, 18 elephants refused to obey. They broke the fence. They tried to escape. The crowd screamed, not in excitement, but in panic. And for the first time, the spectacle was not cheered. Mercy was demanded. That day, the elephants were killed by the gladiators. And Rome learned something: the audience could empathize, if they saw intelligence in the eyes of a beast. The lions, on the other hand, were feared and revered. The Barbary lion, an almost extinct African subspecies today, measured 3 meters and weighed 200 kilograms. One alone managed to kill over 200 men in the arena. Julius Caesar organized hunts of 400 lions just to demonstrate power. Commodus executed them with his bare hands. For them, they were living trophies. But with every roar, with every attempt to escape, with every look of anguish, these animals reminded the people of something. That even at the peak of the empire, there were creatures that could not be tamed. There were deaths, and there were humiliations. And in the Colosseum, not all victims were the same. The Romans distinguished between dying as a gladiator, and dying as scum. The latter were called sumiones, slaves, criminals, foreigners with no rights, Christians. They didn't deserve a sword or a shield. Just a degrading death, in front of thousands of eyes hungry for violence. This is how the damnatio ad bestias, the sentence to die devoured by animals, was born. And one of its most infamous spectacles, the seesaw game. Imagine this: a dozen chained prisoners, naked, trembling under the sun. In front of them, wooden seesaws, identical to those in a playground, but with a lethal purpose. When one went up, the other went down. And from the trapdoors, the beasts emerged: lions, bears, boars. The condemned tried to dodge the claws by jumping, but they knew that, sooner or later, they would come down. And when they came down, death awaited them with fangs. It was not a punishment. It was a choreography of suffering. Designed to make people laugh. Designed to teach a lesson. You are nothing. Your pain is part of the show. And so, amid applause and laughter, the last traces of humanity were erased. Some entered crying. Others, in silence. But a few, decided never to enter. In a place where human will was destroyed daily, some used their last power. The power to choose how to die. The philosopher Seneca tells the story of a German prisoner who swallowed a latrine sponge to suffocate, thus avoiding the spectacle the Romans wanted to make of his body. Another, when being led in a cart to the arena, put his head between the spokes of the wheel. He died instantly. He preferred the crack of his bones to the roar of the crowd. But the most shocking case is that of 29 Saxon prisoners. Locked up the night before their execution, they decided to strangle each other. One by one. Until only one was left. And no one knows how he died. Only that he never stepped onto the sand. These were not simple suicides. They were acts of rebellion. Silent testimonies that, even in the face of absolute power, the human spirit could say, enough. And although their deaths had no audience, Their decisions still resonate like cries of dignity in the midst of the most brutal silence. The Colosseum was built to demonstrate the strength of Rome. But, ironically, it was also where its weakness began. For decades, emperors used the arena to crush a growing threat in the shadows, Christianity. A faith that did not worship the emperor, nor feared death. The Christians were sent to the arena naked, chained, defenseless. And yet, they did not scream. They prayed. They sang. They forgave those who threw them to the beasts. The spectacle, designed to instill fear, began to provoke admiration. The common people, used to seeing blood, began to see something else. A faith that was unbroken, even under the claws of a lion. What began as a public execution, turned into a spiritual testimony. And so, one by one, the Romans began to ask. Who has more power, the one who kills, or the one who dies forgiving? The blood of the martyrs did not extinguish Christianity. It ignited it. And over time, that fire melted the foundations of the empire. When the Colosseum ceased to be useful for controlling the people, Rome was forced to seek another way to govern. And it was never the same again. Every civilization has a part of its history it prefers to hide. In the case of Rome, that dark side manifested itself brutally in the Colosseum. A monument impressive on the outside, but inside, it was the stage for one of the most extreme expressions of limitless power, turning death into a spectacle. Today we walk through it in awe, admire its architecture, and photograph it as if it were just an old postcard. But what very few remember is that every stone witnessed real screams, lives lost for mere entertainment, a crowd applauding while people and animals were sacrificed before their eyes. The Colosseum was not just an amphitheater, it was a political tool, a symbol of control, and a window into the mentality of a society that naturalized the suffering of others. And although time has erased the bodies and silenced the beasts, its legacy remains alive. Because even though there are no longer lions in the arena, the fascination with others' pain has not disappeared. Today, violence is filmed, shared, and goes viral. We have traded marble for screens, but we still watch. And many times, we still applaud. Have we really evolved, or do we simply disguise our own Colosseums with modern lights and empty speeches? That's the question we must ask ourselves. History is not meant to be admired from afar, but to confront us. And if we ignore what we were, we risk repeating it without even realizing it. So tell us, what impacted you the most about all of this? Which of these stories do you think everyone should know? Leave us your comment, and if this video made you think, share it. Because the Colosseum is not just ruins in Rome. It is a reflection of what we are capable of doing when we stop valuing life. If this video made you reflect, tell us in the comments which story impacted you the most. Do you think we could ever repeat something like this, in another form? We'd love to hear your opinion. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Every week we bring content like this, which not only informs but forces you to see history with new eyes. Share this video with someone who thinks the Colosseum was just another monument. Because understanding the past is the only way to avoid repeating it. Thank you for joining us. And remember, not everything that was buried is truly dead.